You are not failing, you are caught in a loop. There is a painful truth that many people carry in silence. You can work hard, stay disciplined, avoid trouble, do your best year after year, and still end each month with almost nothing left. Effort alone does not always lift a life. In many cases, it only keeps the next bill from becoming a disaster. That is why low income feels so cruel. It does not simply limit what you can buy. It slowly narrows how far ahead you can think. When money stays tight for too long, small decisions become survival decisions. You pick what is cheapest, fastest, nearest, and least risky, not because you lack intelligence, but because pressure leaves no room for anything else. What traps you is not only the amount in your wallet. What traps you is a loop. Financial pressure drains your mind. Mental exhaustion pushes you into rushed choices. Rushed choices reduce your options. Fewer options keep income low. Then the pressure begins again. Over time, this does not only reduce resources, it erodes your ability to escape. The World Bank has noted that poverty reduction and equality programs aim not only to raise minimum living standards and address chronic poverty, but also to create new and sustainable economic pathways for those who desire a better life. This means that real progress doesn't come from a short-term increase in income, but from escaping systems that leave people financially vulnerable over time. This book does not promise quick wealth. No miracle formula waits here. Something more useful does. You are about to see why this loop holds so many people in place, and more importantly, how to break one link at a time until your life starts moving in a different direction. Chapter 1. Low income does not begin in your wallet. It begins in a state of constant pressure. Low income looks like a money problem on the surface. Small paycheck, thin savings, bills that arrive faster than relief. That visible layer is real. Yet something deeper usually comes first. A life can start shrinking long before the bank account reaches zero. The true beginning often hides inside a constant state of pressure, the kind that leaves no room to think clearly, recover fully, or plan beyond the next obstacle. In that condition, every ordinary detail becomes charged with tension. Grocery prices matter down to the smallest item. A late payment can ruin an entire evening. One message from a landlord, one unexpected fee, one sick day, one broken tire can shift the whole week into panic. Nothing feels stable. Nothing feels far away. Survival moves to the front of the mind, while growth gets pushed aside without anyone consciously deciding it should. Daily life then becomes a string of narrow decisions. The cheapest option keeps winning, even when it creates larger costs later. The fastest option keeps winning, even when it leads nowhere useful. The safest short-term choice keeps winning, even when it quietly blocks a better future. Under enough pressure, strategy gives way to urgency. Reflection gives way to reaction. Long-term thinking gets replaced by whatever prevents the next immediate problem from exploding. Many outside observers misunderstand this completely. Lack of progress gets blamed on attitude, discipline, intelligence, or ambition. Reality is often harsher and simpler. Clear judgment becomes difficult when the mind is crowded by rent, debt, food costs, transport, overdue notices, and the fear of one more setback. A tired brain does not naturally reach for bold plans. It reaches for relief. A squeezed life does not ask, what could build a stronger future? More often, it asks, what will stop today from falling apart? That difference changes everything. Years can pass inside that mode. Hard work may still be present, Responsibility may still be present. Decency may still be present. What is missing is not always character. What is missing is margin. Some breathing room, some financial and emotional space between a person and the next emergency. Without that space, thought becomes short, vision becomes narrow. Risk feels larger than opportunity. Hope starts sounding expensive. Growth requires more than effort. Better choices usually need calm, comparison, patience, and the ability to wait for a stronger option. Constant pressure steals all four. What remains is endurance. And endurance is noble. But endurance alone does not automatically create upward movement. It keeps life going while the deeper pattern stays untouched. That is why low income should never be seen only as a number. It is also a mental environment. It shapes attention. It shapes time. It shapes what feels possible. A year ahead becomes hard to imagine when the next 3 days already feel fragile. Shame makes this worse. Self-blame adds another weight to a life that is already overloaded. Honest understanding opens a different door. Exhaustion in this situation is not proof of weakness. Stress under these conditions is not failure of character. A pressured life trains the mind to think in compressed ways. Real change begins when the problem is named correctly. Not just low income, not just lack of money, a state of ongoing compression, a life lived too close to the edge for too long. The first step out is not a giant dream or a dramatic leap. Relief must come before expansion. Space must come before strategy. Once pressure begins to ease, even slightly, clearer thought can return. With clearer thought comes better judgment. With better judgment comes the first real crack in the loop. Chapter 2. How the poverty loop actually works. A poverty loop does not feel like a theory while you are living inside it. More often, it feels like a string of bad months, unlucky breaks, and constant recovery from problems that should have been small. From the outside, the pattern can look messy. From the inside, the structure is painfully consistent. Low income comes first. Basic expenses then swallow almost everything that comes in. Rent, food, transport, utilities, debt payments, school costs, medicine, and a few ordinary necessities leave almost no room behind. What remains is too thin to become protection. No cushion forms, no reserve grows, no quiet safety waits in the background. At that point, life becomes fragile. One minor disruption can suddenly act like a major crisis. A car repair is no longer a repair. It becomes a threat to work attendance. A week of illness is no longer just fatigue. It becomes a missed payment, a delayed bill, a shortage at the worst moment. A broken phone is not just an inconvenience. It can interrupt contact, work, transport, and access to opportunity all at once. When no emergency fund exists, every surprise arrives with full force. Pressure rises immediately. In that moment, the mind rarely asks what is best in the long run. Survival takes command. Borrowing becomes tempting. Cutting essentials becomes normal. Bad jobs become acceptable because immediate money matters more than future growth. A payday loan, a rushed shift, a humiliating favor, a delayed medical visit, a cheaper but weaker option. All of it starts to look reasonable when the alternative is collapse. Nothing about those choices proves foolishness. They often make perfect sense inside a pressured system. The problem is what comes next. Short-term solutions usually leave damage behind. Borrowed money returns as heavier pressure next month. Missed rest returns as lower energy. Cheap solutions return as repeated expenses. A job taken in desperation often blocks time needed for learning, recovery, or searching for something better. Little by little, the future gets traded away to protect the present. That trade is the engine of the loop. Emotional consequences soon enter the picture. Constant instability wears down the nervous system. Hope becomes harder to hold. Confidence weakens. Focus gets scattered. Learning something new takes more effort. Job searching feels harder. Networking feels awkward. Even filling out an application can feel strangely exhausting when the mind has spent weeks managing stress. Capacity drops, not because ability disappears, but because pressure consumes the energy that growth requires. Opportunity then shrinks again. Fewer applications get sent. Fewer risks get taken. Fewer skills get built. Better roles stay out of reach. Income stays low. Once income stays low, the same basic expenses keep consuming nearly everything again, and the cycle resets with even less inner strength than before. That is why poverty is not simply the absence of money. A deeper truth sits underneath it. Fragility is the real trap. When one small mistake, one late payment, one health issue, or one unlucky event can destroy an entire month, life stops operating like a stable system. It starts operating like a row of falling dominoes. Consider how ordinary examples reveal the pattern. A car breaks down. Missing transport leads to missed work. Missed work reduces income. Reduced income delays rent. Delayed rent creates fees and panic. Panic leads to a rushed loan. The loan increases next month's burden. Or consider illness. A single week in bed can mean lower pay, extra medicine costs, less food security, and rising anxiety at once. Nothing dramatic had to happen. No huge disaster was required. A small crack was enough because the structure was already under strain. Real freedom begins with seeing this clearly. Shame says, I should have handled things better. Wisdom says, a loop is operating here, and each link strengthens the next. Once the pattern becomes visible, blame starts losing its power. The goal is no longer to fix everything in one heroic move. The goal is to identify the exact link that keeps tightening the chain, then weaken it before it drags the whole system down again. Chapter 3. The most dangerous part of low income is how it teaches you to live smaller. Money problems do more than limit comfort. Over time, they begin to reshape identity. First comes caution, then hesitation. After that, a quieter and more dangerous shift begins. Ambition starts shrinking without announcing itself. Possibility starts feeling unrealistic. A smaller life begins to look reasonable, then normal, then permanent. That is why low income can be so destructive even when it does not look dramatic from the outside. Damage is not measured only in unpaid bills or delayed plans. Something deeper gets worn down. Confidence loses strength. Self-trust becomes fragile. A person who once imagined growth can slowly become someone who only hopes not to fall apart. This change rarely happens in one visible moment. No single morning arrives with a clear thought that says, from now on, less is enough. The process is quieter than that. A better job appears, but the application never gets sent because rejection feels too expensive. A useful course looks promising, but the cost seems irresponsible, even when the real cost of staying stuck is far greater. A needed career shift becomes imaginable for a few minutes. Then fear takes over, because current income, however limited, still feels safer than uncertainty. Soon, even the idea of deserving more starts to feel uncomfortable. Such patterns create one of the deepest wounds inside the poverty loop. External lack slowly becomes internal limitation. Long exposure to scarcity teaches the mind to lower its expectations in order to reduce pain. That adjustment can feel practical at first. Expect less, risk less, want less, hope less. The heart learns this as a survival strategy. Disappointment hurts less when desire stays small. Failure feels less threatening when no large attempt is made. In the short term, that mindset protects emotional energy. In the long term, it quietly builds a cage. Instead of asking, "How can life expand from here?" another question takes over. How can I keep things from getting worse? That difference is enormous. One question opens movement. The other organizes life around damage control. Many adults living with low income do not suffer from a lack of potential. More often, they suffer from repeated exposure to instability. Enough years of financial strain can train the mind to distrust open doors. A stronger opportunity may look exciting for a moment, then immediately trigger fear about interviews, clothing, transport, timing, skill gaps, and the risk of losing what little stability already exists. Growth begins to feel dangerous because scarcity has taught the nervous system that safety matters more than expansion. In that state, self-limitation becomes easy to mistake for realism. A smaller dream feels mature. A lower standard feels practical. Settling begins to sound wise. Yet much of that apparent realism is not truth. It is adaptation. Scarcity has a way of making the human spirit negotiate against itself. This is the quiet victory of the poverty loop. Not merely keeping income low, but persuading a person to stop reaching beyond it. Once that happens, the trap becomes stronger than money alone. No guard is needed. No prison wall is needed. A diminished inner horizon does the work. Fewer applications get written. Fewer conversations get started. Fewer skills get pursued with conviction. The life being lived slowly drops beneath the life that was once possible. Recognition must come before change. Freedom begins when this shrinking process is seen clearly and without shame. Nothing weak sits inside that adaptation. Survival intelligence sits there. Pain management sits there. Fear sits there. Years of protecting a fragile life sit there. Compassion matters. But honesty matters too. Living smaller for too long can start to feel natural. That feeling must not be confused with destiny. More remains possible than pressure has allowed the mind to believe. Escaping low income begins long before money increases. A deeper starting point waits beneath the numbers. Vision must widen again. Worth must be felt again. The first real breakthrough comes when familiar self-restriction is finally recognized for what it is. Not wisdom, not humility, not maturity, but a learned response to prolonged scarcity. Only then can a larger life come back into view. Chapter 4. Working more does not always create more. Because effort can be poured into places that produce no real value. Hard work carries a powerful reputation. Most people are taught from an early age that more effort leads to better results. And in some parts of life, that belief is true. Discipline matters. Reliability matters. Persistence matters. Still, one painful reality must be faced. A life can be filled with motion and still remain stuck. Long hours can pass without creating real advancement. Exhaustion can grow while income barely moves. Many adults trapped in low income are not underworking. Quite the opposite. Days are often packed, energy is often drained, and yet the overall position hardly improves. That contradiction creates deep frustration because effort feels honest, while the outcome feels unfair. The hidden issue is not always the amount of labor. The hidden issue is where that labor goes and what it produces over time. Being busy is not the same as moving forward. A calendar full of tasks does not guarantee progress. Constant activity can simply mean that survival has become a full-time occupation. One errand leads to another. One shift leads to another. One small crisis takes over the next. At the end of the week, fatigue feels heavy, but nothing lasting has been built. No new leverage appears. No stronger position has formed. No future income has been made easier. That is the danger of confusing movement with value. 3 traps show up again and again inside the poverty loop. The first is the trap of trading time for money forever. In that model, every dollar depends on continued presence. Stop working, and income stops too. Such work may be necessary for a season, sometimes for a long season. But trouble begins when all available energy stays trapped there without creating a path upward. No space remains for learning, repositioning, or building something that pays more for the same hour. The second is the trap of work that teaches nothing new. A role can consume years while leaving skills almost unchanged. Repetition grows, but value in the market does not. Familiarity increases, but bargaining power stays weak. Another year passes, and replacement remains easy because the work never developed into something harder to find. The third is the trap of solving only immediate shortages. Extra hours get taken to cover this month's rent. Side work gets accepted to pay off a sudden cost. Temporary relief arrives, then disappears into the next problem. Such choices often make sense in the moment, yet a harsh pattern can form when every bit of effort goes toward plugging today's holes while nothing strengthens tomorrow's position. The core question becomes unavoidable. Is the work being done helping income rise over time, or only helping survival continue for one more month? That question changes the whole conversation. It shifts attention away from moral judgment and towards strategic clarity. More labor is not always the answer. Better direction matters just as much. A person can spend years pouring strength into work that keeps life barely functioning while producing no real increase in skill, leverage, credibility, or earning power. No laziness is required for stagnation. Misplaced effort is enough. None of this means working less. It means refusing to give every drop of strength to tasks that build no bridge forward. Some labor keeps the lights on. Other labor changes the future. Wisdom lies in learning the difference. Even a small shift toward value-creating effort can begin to alter the pattern. One useful skill developed after work. One responsibility taken on that proves higher capability. One task learned that fewer people can do well. One problem solved that others are willing to pay more to remove. Those moves may look modest at first, but they point in a different direction. Escape from low income rarely begins with a dramatic leap. More often, it begins when effort stops being scattered across pure survival and starts being placed, little by little, into something that grows worth instead of only draining strength. Chapter 5. Instability forces poor people to buy the cheapest option, and the cheapest option often costs more in the end. One of the cruelest parts of low income is this: the wrong choice is not always chosen because it looks better. Often, it gets chosen because no real alternative is available. From the outside, cheap decisions can seem careless or short-sighted. From the inside, they often come from pressure, urgency, and the absence of financial room. That is why instability matters so much. A person with margin can choose based on total value. A person without margin usually has to choose based on immediate survival. In that difference, an entire pattern of hidden loss begins. Everyday life offers countless examples. Shoes with poor quality wear out quickly, but the stronger pair costs too much upfront. A cheap appliance breaks after a few months, but the durable version requires money that does not exist today. A room with lower rent may seem like relief at first, yet distance adds transport costs, steals time, drains energy, and makes work harder to sustain. A job with weak pay may be accepted immediately, not because it offers a future, but because waiting for something better feels too risky when bills are already due. None of these decisions are irrational in the moment. They are responses to instability. Scarcity presses everything toward the short term. When no cushion exists, the next week matters more than the next year. Survival logic takes over. Immediate affordability becomes the main filter, even when that choice creates greater long-term cost. Cheap items need replacing. Long commutes reduce rest and flexibility. Low-quality services create repeat problems. Fast money often leads into low-value work with no growth. Short-term relief arrives, then slowly transforms into a larger burden. This is one of the deepest contradictions inside the poverty loop. The cheapest path can become the most expensive path, but the better option remains out of reach because its entry price is too high. That pattern appears far beyond shopping. Health works this way. Preventive care often gets delayed because money is tight, only for a small issue to become more serious later. Career decisions work this way too. A rushed job offer may protect the month, while quietly blocking the skill building or search time needed for stronger opportunities. Housing works this way. Lower rent in a harmful environment can lead to stress, insecurity, longer travel, and fewer chances to move upward. In each case, the problem is not simply poor judgment. A harsher truth sits underneath. Lack of stability removes the right to choose well. Many discussions about poverty miss that point. Advice is easy to give when breathing room already exists. Buy quality. Think long-term. Wait for a better opening. Invest in yourself. All of that can be wise. But wisdom becomes difficult to apply when the present feels fragile. A person standing on shaky ground cannot always afford the best long-term move, even when the better move is obvious. That is why shame does not help. Moralizing does not help. A more accurate understanding is needed. Many costly decisions made under low income are not failures of character. They are the price of having too little room. This chapter matters because it points toward a critical truth. Escape from low income does not begin with perfect decisions. It begins with creating enough stability to make better decisions possible. A little margin changes everything. With some breathing room, quality can be chosen over constant replacement. Opportunity can be weighed instead of grabbed in panic. Time can be used with more intention. Energy can be protected instead of burned away. The next chapter turns toward that first real turning point. Before income rises in a major way, a small buffer must appear. Not a grand fortune, not a dramatic breakthrough, just enough protection to stop every small problem from becoming a crisis. That first layer of shock resistance is where the way out truly begins. Chapter 6. A small buffer is the first real step out. Grand plans often sound inspiring when life feels stuck. Bigger income, better work, a different city, a complete restart. Those ideas can matter later, but none of them comes first. Before major change becomes realistic, something smaller and more practical has to appear. A buffer. Not a luxury, not a fantasy. Just enough protection to keep one difficult moment from turning into a full collapse. That is the first true escape move for anyone caught in the poverty loop. Without a buffer, every setback lands with full force. A delayed payment becomes panic. A sick day becomes a financial wound. One broken device becomes an interruption to work, communication, transport, and routine all at once. Stability cannot grow in a life where every small shock knocks everything over. Protection must arrive before expansion. Breathing room must arrive before strategy. A buffer creates that breathing room. Its power does not come from size alone. Its power comes from what it prevents. Instead of falling immediately into debt, there is a pause. Instead of reacting in fear, there is a moment to think. Instead of accepting the worst option in desperation, there is a chance to choose something less damaging. That shift may look modest from the outside, yet inside daily life, it changes almost everything. 4 forms of buffer matter most. The first is cash. Even a small emergency reserve can interrupt the pattern of borrowing, late fees, and panic spending. A modest amount will not solve every problem, but it can stop minor trouble from becoming a chain reaction. Medicine, transport, food, and one urgent repair no longer need to be handled through crisis alone. The second is time. A schedule with no spare hour leaves no room to recover, learn, apply for something better, or even think clearly. A buffer of time may come from one protected evening each week, one less draining commitment, or one routine that saves energy instead of scattering it. Such space can become the hidden doorway to progress because exhausted people rarely build strong futures from constant motion alone. The third is skill. Relying on one narrow ability keeps income fragile. One added skill, especially one that can be used across jobs or turned into paid work, creates flexibility. Better options begin to appear when value is no longer tied to a single task or role. That kind of buffer protects the future, not just the present. The fourth is relationship. One helpful connection can shorten a year of confusion. Advice from someone experienced. An introduction to an opening. A recommendation at the right time. Or even a person who knows how to guide a next step can make the path less lonely and less random. Many adults underestimate this form of protection because it does not sit in a bank account, yet it often changes outcomes faster than expected. What matters here is scale. No enormous leap is required at the beginning. Pressure often whispers that only dramatic change counts. Real life tells a different story. A first buffer may be very small. A week of basic expenses set aside. A skill practiced until it becomes useful. 2 hours reclaimed every weekend. One new contact built through honest effort. These do not look glamorous. They do not sound like overnight transformation. Still, each one adds shock resistance, and shock resistance is what breaks the loop's power. Low income becomes most dangerous when life stays exposed to every blow. A buffer changes that exposure. One layer of protection becomes the first layer of freedom. Once a person no longer falls apart from every disruption, judgment improves. Once judgment improves, stronger choices become possible. Once stronger choices become possible, the way out stops being abstract. It begins to take shape in real, usable steps. Chapter 7. To increase income, stop selling only labor and start increasing the value you create. For a long time, earning money can feel simple on the surface. Hours go in. Payment comes back. More hours usually mean more pay. That arrangement seems normal because it is familiar, and in the beginning it may even be necessary. Still, a hard ceiling appears when income depends only on physical presence, available time, and personal endurance. Under that model, the body becomes the engine, the clock becomes the limit, and exhaustion becomes part of the price. A painful truth follows. More effort does not always produce more income. Once labor is the only thing being sold, Progress begins to change when value, not just effort, enters the picture. Labor paid by the hour follows one rule. Skill paid by results follows another. Market value paid by difficulty of replacement follows an even stronger one. That distinction matters because higher income rarely comes from working forever at the same level of usefulness. Growth usually comes from becoming more capable, more effective, more reliable, or harder to replace in a meaningful area. Marketplaces do not reward struggle in a pure form. They reward contribution that solves problems, saves time, reduces risk, improves results, or handles tasks that others cannot do easily. This is where many people trapped in low income need a different lens. The question is not only, how hard am I working? A more powerful question is, what am I becoming better at that other people value enough to pay more for? Once that shift happens, income stops being tied only to stamina. It starts connecting to usefulness. Several paths can raise that usefulness. Speed is one of them. Finishing good work faster creates value because time matters to everyone. Quality is another. Stronger output, fewer mistakes, clearer communication, and dependable performance all increase trust. And trust carries economic weight. Rarity matters too. Work that fewer people can do well tends to command better pay because replacement becomes harder. Problem solving may matter most of all. Whenever a painful, annoying, costly, or time-consuming problem gets removed from another person's life, value rises immediately. Think about the difference between simply completing a task and truly solving a problem. One worker follows instructions. Another notices friction, improves a process, prevents delays, or helps results improve. Both may appear busy, yet only one begins to move towards stronger income potential. Employers, clients, and markets pay more willingly when relief, clarity, or advantage is created. That is why personal growth in this area should not be understood as self-improvement for appearance alone. A practical aim sits underneath it. Become more useful at a level that matters in the real world. That does not require quitting everything overnight. Dramatic exits are often romanticized, but they are not the only road upward. Many lives improve through quieter moves. A stronger responsibility taken inside a current job. A new tool learned after hours. Better communication added to existing technical skill. A side capability developed until it becomes valuable enough to earn from. Little by little, labor begins turning into leverage. Time alone no longer carries the whole burden. Caution still matters here. Not everyone needs to resign, launch a business, or reinvent life in one bold move. What matters first is honest reflection. For what reason is money currently being paid? Mere presence, obedience, repetition, or real value that improves outcomes? The answer reveals a great deal. Sustainable income growth rarely comes from luck alone. Short bursts of luck can happen, of course, but long-term improvement usually follows a clearer pattern. Greater usefulness creates stronger bargaining power. Stronger bargaining power creates better options. Better options create movement. Escape from low income begins to accelerate at the moment labor stops being the only thing on offer. A better future opens when value grows, because markets may overlook effort for a while, but they rarely ignore someone who consistently makes life, work, or results better in ways that are hard to replace. Chapter 8. People trapped in the poverty loop usually do not lack effort, they lack the right learning strategy. A painful misunderstanding surrounds many low-income lives. Outsiders often assume the missing piece is effort, as if better outcomes would appear automatically if discipline increased. Reality is usually more complicated. Long hours are already being spent. energy is already being drained. Motivation is often present, but it gets scattered across too many directions with too little return. That is why effort alone does not solve the problem. Without a learning strategy that leads toward real earning power, hard work can remain sincere while results stay painfully small. Modern life makes this trap even easier to fall into. Inspiration is everywhere. Advice is endless. Courses, videos, podcasts, short clips, and motivational messages create the feeling of movement. Minds stay busy, notebooks fill up, new terms become familiar. A person may even feel productive for a while simply because so much information is being consumed. Yet scattered learning often produces a dangerous illusion. Progress seems close, but earning ability barely changes. Bits of knowledge collect without forming a usable advantage. One topic gets explored for a few days, then another takes over. Curiosity stays alive, but depth never arrives. This pattern feels active, though it rarely changes income in a meaningful way. The deepest problem is not learning too little. More often, the problem is learning without a path to output. Interesting material gets chosen instead of useful material. Emotional relief gets chosen instead of market relevance. A lesson that sounds wise may still do nothing to improve work, raise value, or open a stronger opportunity. Many adults caught in financial strain study to feel hope for a moment, not because the learning is structured to change position. That difference matters. Hope is precious, but hope without direction can become another form of delay. A better approach begins with one honest question. What skill has real demand and can realistically turn into money, stronger employment, or better bargaining power? That question clears away much confusion. Not every useful skill must be glamorous. Some improve communication. Some improve organization. Some help with sales, writing, design, technology, service, operations, repair, analysis, teaching, or coordination. What matters most is practical demand. Once one clear direction is chosen, a second principle becomes essential. Learn until action is possible, not until information feels complete. Endless preparation keeps many people poor because perfection becomes an excuse for postponement. Real growth starts when ability is tested in small ways. A first small project, a trial service, a simple portfolio piece, a basic freelance task, a work improvement inside a current role. Action exposes weaknesses faster than passive study ever can. Feedback then becomes the next teacher. Responses from real people reveal what needs improvement, what already works, and where value is actually being recognized. From there, refinement begins. Skill gets sharpened. Confidence becomes more honest. Quality rises. Value rises with it. Then the cycle repeats. Learn with purpose. Practice until usable. Apply in a small way. Gather feedback. Improve. Repeat. That rhythm may look humble compared with grand promises of transformation, but it creates something far more powerful. It turns learning into leverage. Financial struggle often pushes people toward urgency, and urgency makes random action feel tempting. Still, random learning rarely builds a way out. Precision matters more than volume. One relevant skill developed deeply can change a life faster than 10 shallow interests that never become useful. No shame belongs here. Wandering through information is understandable when someone is trying to survive and still dream at the same time. A clearer path now becomes possible. Rescue does not come from learning more for its own sake. Rescue comes from learning the right thing to the point of practical use. in a way that can alter real conditions. That is when knowledge stops being comfort alone and starts becoming a ladder. Chapter 9. A poor environment keeps people stuck, not only through money, but through habits and standards that surround them. Money matters, but environment often decides how far money can take a life. A person can want change sincerely and still remain stuck because daily surroundings keep teaching the same limits again and again. What feels normal in one environment can feel impossible in another. That is why poverty is rarely held in place by income alone. Habits, expectations, conversations, and shared standards also do the work. A world built around constant coping slowly turns coping into a lifestyle. Once that happens, the hunger for something better may still exist. Yet the path toward it becomes harder to see. Spend enough time around people who live month to month, and survival begins to look like the natural shape of adulthood. Hear enough conversations focused only on bills, unfair bosses, bad luck, quick spending, and temporary relief. And the mind starts accepting those themes as the full range of what life offers. No rule needs to be announced. No one has to say, "Stay where you are." The message arrives more quietly. This is how people like us live. This is what work feels like. This is what money does. This is what can be expected. Such messages carry enormous power because repetition makes them feel true. A poor environment also narrows imagination by limiting exposure. When almost nobody nearby talks about skill building, strategic choices, better networks, healthier routines, or long-term positioning, upward movement starts sounding distant and unnatural. A different kind of life may still exist, but it no longer feels concrete. Without visible models, growth becomes abstract. Without nearby proof, effort becomes harder to sustain. Energy weakens when nothing around you reflects the direction you are trying to move toward. Several kinds of environment can hold a person in place. Workplaces do it first. A job with no path upward, no learning, no mentoring, and no increase in responsibility can quietly train a person to expect stagnation. Days pass, tasks repeat, income stays flat, and ambition starts adjusting downward. Relationships can do the same. Some social circles reward short-term pleasure, impulsive spending, gossip, resignation, or emotional escape, while treating discipline, planning, or improvement as unnecessary pressure. Family patterns can hold similar power. Homes shaped by long years of insecurity sometimes mistake low expectation for safety. Risk gets discouraged. Change gets questioned. Smallness gets defended as practicality. Emotional climate matters too. Constant complaining, chronic blame, and endless pessimism create a mental weather system that drains courage before action even begins. None of this means other people are enemies. Cruel judgment would miss the point entirely. Many struggling environments are filled with good hearts, loyalty, sacrifice, and love. The issue is not whether people are decent. The issue is whether the atmosphere around you supports expansion or quietly normalizes limitation. That distinction matters. A person does not need to abandon everyone in order to grow. Still, some form of intentional selection becomes necessary. Better influences must be added. Stronger conversations must be sought. Healthier standards must be practiced until they stop feeling foreign. A useful environment may come from one mentor, one serious friend, one community, one course, one workplace, one set of routines, or even one repeated source of sober encouragement that reminds you a larger life is possible. Change often begins there. New standards create new expectations. New expectations shape decisions. Better decisions slowly alter outcomes. Escaping low income therefore requires more than personal effort. Surroundings must begin changing too, even if only in small ways at first. Growth becomes easier when the life around you stops training you to settle. That is why environment deserves attention. Not because it excuses every result, but because it silently influences what feels normal, what feels possible, and what kind of future the mind is willing to prepare for. Chapter 10. To escape poverty, you must face the decisions that are making it worse. Compassion matters when talking about low income. Hardship is real. Unfairness is real. Bad luck is real. Systems can be harsh. Wages can be weak. And opportunities can be unevenly distributed. None of that should be denied. Still, another truth must stand beside it. Inside difficult circumstances, certain decisions can quietly deepen the struggle. Seeing that clearly is not self-attack. It is the beginning of power. Without that kind of honesty, change remains vague, because everything painful gets blamed on forces outside your reach. Real progress begins when attention turns toward the choices that may be keeping the loop alive. One of the hardest areas to face is emotional spending. Money often becomes a form of relief long before it becomes a form of strategy. A rough week creates a craving for comfort. Exhaustion asks for reward. Loneliness asks for something pleasant, immediate, and easy. In those moments, spending can feel small and harmless, almost deserved. Yet repeated emotional purchases create a silent leak. Relief lasts minutes. Pressure returns and grows heavier. The problem is not pleasure itself. The problem appears when spending becomes a way to numb stress while quietly strengthening the conditions that caused the stress in the first place. Another pattern hides inside avoidance. A difficult skill would help, but comfort keeps pulling attention back toward what feels familiar. A stronger opportunity exists, but the learning curve feels embarrassing. A better path requires patience, but immediate ease wins again. Underneath that pattern often sits fear, not laziness. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of wasting effort on something uncertain. Familiar struggle starts feeling safer than unfamiliar growth, even when familiar struggle has already proven costly. That is how a person can remain stuck in a bad situation. Not because no exit exists, but because the first hard step keeps getting postponed. Work choices can reveal the same pattern. A poor job may be draining, underpaid, and clearly limited, yet years still pass without serious movement toward something better. Habit plays a role. So does fatigue. So does the comfort of knowing exactly what to expect, even when what to expect is damaging. Delay then starts wearing respectable clothing. Now is not the right time. Things are too unstable. Maybe later. Sometimes those reasons are valid. Sometimes they hide a deeper truth. Remaining in what is known can feel easier than risking a temporary drop in security for the sake of long-term gain. Excuses about circumstances deserve close attention as well. Lack of time, lack of money, lack of support, lack of access, all can be real. Still, honest reflection must ask whether those phrases describe a wall or whether they have slowly become a shield against uncomfortable action. Some limits are structural. Others become emotional protection. Distinguishing between the two changes everything. One invites problem solving, the other preserves paralysis. This chapter asks for courage, because victimhood can become seductive when life has been painful for too long. Blame offers emotional shelter. It explains disappointment quickly. It also weakens intervention. Once every problem belongs only to the world, personal influence begins to disappear from view. That is why direct questions matter. Has money been used to soothe emotion more than to build stability? Has fear of difficulty kept you attached to what is familiar? Has delay disguised itself as caution? Has a bad job been tolerated far past its usefulness because change felt too uncomfortable? None of these questions exists to humiliate. Their purpose is to return authorship to your life. Circumstances may be unfair, but choices still shape direction inside those circumstances. That truth is not cruel. It is liberating. Escape from poverty requires more than endurance. It requires intervention. Honest self-confrontation becomes the moment when passivity starts to break. Once the decisions that make the struggle heavier are finally named without excuse, the role of helpless victim begins to loosen, and the role of active changemaker begins to emerge. Chapter 11. The way out does not begin with one massive breakthrough. It begins with repairing the right link first. Many people stay trapped longer than necessary because the mind keeps waiting for one dramatic turning point. A large sum of money, a powerful connection, a perfect opportunity, a complete life reset. That image is seductive because it promises fast relief. It turns escape into a single event, something sudden and almost cinematic. Real life rarely works that way. Most lasting change begins in a quieter place. One weak link gets identified. One pressure point gets reduced. One repeating pattern gets interrupted. From there, the entire system starts behaving differently. This matters because hopelessness often grows from scale. When every problem is viewed at once, the burden feels impossible. Debt, low pay, poor habits, unstable work, stress, weak skills, bad timing, and fear all appear together. Then the nervous system freezes. No step feels big enough to matter. Waiting begins. Delay grows. Nothing changes. A different approach creates movement. Instead of attacking the whole wall, attention turns to the first crack that can actually be made. That shift is practical and psychologically powerful. Momentum usually begins when the next solvable problem is chosen with honesty. Pressure then becomes easier to manage because effort finally has a target. Different lives require different first links. Debt may be the one tightening everything else. In that case, the first repair is not a dream career or a bold investment. The first repair is stopping the financial bleeding, reducing penalties, restructuring what can be restructured, and ending the cycle that turns every month into deeper panic. In other cases, weak skill is the central link. Income stays low not because effort is absent, but because earning power has stopped at a level the market does not reward strongly. Then the first repair becomes focused learning with real output, not broad inspiration, not random motivation, but one capability built until it changes value. Sometimes, the real problem sits inside the work itself. A job can consume time, energy, and spirit while offering no path forward. Under those conditions, repairing the income link may mean preparing a transition, building evidence of stronger ability, or creating a second source of earning power before making a move. Another life may be held down by unconscious spending. Money enters, but emotion directs too much of it toward comfort, impulse, or social pressure. Then the first repair is not earning more. The first repair is restoring discipline around outflow so every dollar stops disappearing into reactions. What matters most is sequence. Wrong sequence wastes strength. Trying to build wealth while debt is exploding creates frustration. Trying to network powerfully while shame and exhaustion remain untreated creates inconsistency. Trying to plan 5 years ahead while this month keeps collapsing often produces fantasy instead of traction. Stronger order creates stronger results. First, pressure gets reduced at the point where it is most destructive. Then capacity returns. Then the next link can be addressed with greater clarity. This is why the way out is often less glamorous than people hope and far more effective than people expect. No dramatic leap may happen at the beginning. A small but correct intervention can still change the direction of an entire year. One expense pattern stopped. One debt cycle interrupted. One skill turned useful. One source of chaos brought under control. Those moves may look modest from the outside, yet each one changes the structure underneath daily life. A chain weakens when the right link weakens. Freedom grows the same way. The image to hold is simple. No need to destroy the whole wall at once. One fracture in the right place can change everything that follows. That is how real escape begins. Not with fantasy, not with perfect timing, not with one giant rescue, but with the discipline to see the system clearly and the courage to repair what is tightening it most. Chapter 12. A one-year plan to escape. Low income must be realistic, not beautiful. A useful plan for escaping low income should not sound impressive on paper. It should work under stress, survive imperfect weeks, and remain possible in an ordinary life filled with fatigue, setbacks, and limited room. Beauty is not the goal here. Stability is, movement is. A year can change far more than most people expect, but only when the plan respects reality instead of trying to perform motivation. 4 stages create the strongest structure. The first stage is stabilization. Before growth can become meaningful, the biggest leak must be identified and contained. That may be a debt cycle, chaotic spending, repeated fees, a transport problem, or the absence of any emergency reserve. Clear tracking matters at this stage. Money coming in must be named. Money going out must be named. One harmful pattern must be cut without negotiation. One small buffer must begin. The first months are not glamorous because they are not supposed to be. Their job is to stop the ground from moving under your feet. The second stage is value building. Once pressure eases even slightly, a more important question can finally lead the way. What skill can realistically turn into better pay, stronger work, or added income within reach of your current life? A practical answer matters more than an exciting one. Learning must now follow output, not curiosity alone. Skill practice should lead towards something usable, visible, and provable. One finished sample, one measurable result, one piece of evidence that says greater value now exists than before. The third stage is repositioning. Better value must eventually meet better opportunity. That may mean applying for stronger roles, seeking a more promising employer, raising rates for useful work, asking for increased responsibility, or building a side income that no longer depends only on spare desperation. Relationships matter here as well. Helpful contacts, stronger professional conversations, and environments that reflect higher standards can accelerate movement more than isolated effort alone. The fourth stage is protection against falling back. Rising income means little if lifestyle expands faster than security. A common mistake appears right here. Relief arrives, then spending rises to match it. Old emotional habits return. Buffers disappear. Pressure quietly rebuilds. That is why the final stage requires discipline. Emergency savings must remain active. Learning must continue. Spending must stay conscious. Short-term pleasure must not be allowed to destroy long-term recovery. None of this needs to look heroic. A realistic year may include mistakes, slow months, discouragement, and moments where progress feels invisible. That does not cancel the plan. What matters is direction. Stabilize first. Build value next. Reposition with intention. Protect what improves. Such a year may not look dramatic from the outside, yet by the end of it, life can become less fragile. Income can become more flexible, and the future can begin to feel like something you are shaping instead of something you are merely surviving. The poverty loop does not open by itself, but it can be broken. Low income is rarely one problem standing alone. Pressure, exhaustion, short-term decisions, weak margins, reduced opportunity, and shrinking confidence often lock together and strengthen one another. That is why the struggle can feel endless. Not because you are doomed, and not because effort means nothing, but because several links have been pulling in the same direction for a long time. Breaking free does not require solving everything at once. No perfect life plan is needed. No miracle is required. One honest shift in the right place can begin changing the whole pattern. A damaging expense can be stopped. A useful skill can be built. A bad cycle of debt can be interrupted. A stronger environment can be chosen. A small buffer can be protected. Once the right link weakens, the loop starts losing power. 3 ideas deserve to stay with you after the final page. Do not ask only how to earn more. Ask what has been keeping life at this level. Do not wait for total clarity before moving. Start where the pressure is doing the most damage. Do not measure progress only by dramatic results. Count the ways life becomes less fragile, less fearful, and less controlled by emergencies. Escape from low income does not begin with luck. It begins on the day old survival patterns stop ruling every decision. A different future becomes possible the moment the loop is seen clearly and challenged deliberately. That moment can begin now.